Hello, everybody. Thanks for braving the rain, even though it's not actually raining right now. I'm going to do this. This is too tall for me. All right. Thanks for coming out. Thank you, Peter.
My pleasure.
Should I formally introduce you? I wrote a whole spiel. I'm Lindsay Parker, by the way. This is Peter Jesperson. Give this man a hand. This record wouldn't be out. We wouldn't all be here. I actually think music in general might be very different without you and without your involvement with the band. We're all here to celebrate. But I wrote a whole spiel. I've known this guy for, we worked together.
Yeah, starting in 1992.
I was 10 years old at the time.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't 92. Oh, that's crazy. I was in awe of you then, and I also, shameless plug for myself and for you, you have a book called Euphoric Recall.
I do.
And I have like a one sentence mention in it, which I was really, when you mentioned some of your favorite coworkers from back in the day, I made the list.
You were probably edited out. I wrote about twice as much as ended up being in the book, so you probably...
No one picked up that book to read about me, so that's totally fine. They wanted to hear about all the cool stuff you've done, including, of course, with the replacement. So I'm going to read the spiel. Does anyone want to hear the spiel I wrote? And then we're going to just start talking about this. All right, so you're probably the most passionate music fan I've ever met or worked with. I'm proud to call you a friend, former coworker, as I mentioned. I learned a lot from you. So this is Peter Jesperson, obviously. In 1997, you co-founded the legendary Minneapolis label Twin Tone Records, which was home to Soul Asylum, many bands, Babes in Toyland, the Jayhawks, the Suburbs, a lot of great Midwest bands, and of course, the Replacements. So as the mythology has it, in 1980, you made the discovery that changed the course of your life, changed the course of alternative rock, indie rock, college rock, just rock in general. When a man named Paul Westberg, he walked into the record store you worked at,
Yep.
and he handed you a demo tape.
He did.
And you went on to become, I don't even know if you ever really had a title, but some people called you, I read somewhere they called you the fifth replacement, but I guess I would say Slim Dunlap would be the fifth.
Babysitter.
You became, okay, babysitter, A&R rep, manager, producer, mentor, legal guardian to Tommy Stinson for a while, if I'm not mistaken. And 4 years after that moment where Paul handed you that tape, the Replacements released what many consider to be, I don't know if you consider it to be their greatest work, but many critics consider it to be their greatest work, which is their third studio album, Let It Be. And I'm sure our conversation is going to go all over the place because you know so much and you've done so much, but we'll mostly focus on this record, which just came out as a deluxe 4 LP edition today with lots of unreleased goodies, studio recordings, outtakes, live recordings, and let's just kind of start. I know you've spent about 2 years being involved with curating this project.
Yep, we started would have been 2 years ago, right about now.
And obviously all of the Replacements discography is amazing, but a lot of rock scholars or critics or historians, when they look at this record, they look at it as the one where Paul Westerberg kind of came into his own as a songwriter or very rapidly matured as a singer-songwriter. The band very quickly evolved from, their punk origins. So I'd love your insight into how that came to be. Was it like a conscious thing where they're like, it's time to grow up, or how'd that come to be?
I think it was a gradual thing. I think, Paul was a great songwriter right from the get-go. From the first tape I got a 4-song demo in the spring of 1980. He walked into the record store. I'd never met him before, handed me a tape. When I listened to it, it really was, for somebody, I've done A&R all my life, quote-unquote talent scouting. And I don't know that I ever had an experience quite like that. It was probably 20, 30 seconds into the first song where I just felt like somebody put my finger in an electrical socket. And I actually stopped the tape and rewound it. I was actually at a record store. I managed a record store in Minneapolis. And I was listening to a bunch of demos that I had received while I was doing paperwork for the store. And so as the tape started, I was probably slightly distracted. I thought time to put my pen down and just listen. And so I played the first song all over again, and my first reaction was that it sounded to me like some kind of modern update on Chuck Berry with dirty words. And not that Chuck didn't have his share of dirty words at certain points, but So yeah, so I got the tape and I was so excited about it. It took me a couple of days to calm down and make sure that my reaction was not that I hadn't overreacted. And so I called a couple of days later, and I remember a female voice answering the phone. I believe it was his mother. Hands the phone to Paul. He says, "Hello." I identify myself. I'm the guy at the record store you gave the tape to. I really love the tape. Were you thinking about doing an album or a single? And there was a long pause, and he said, quote unquote, "You mean you think this shit is worth recording?" And because at the same time as we had Twin Tone in motion, I was also DJing at a club where I had some sway with the booking agent. And so a lot of people gave me tapes to try to get gigs at this club called the Longhorn. Turned out that that's why Paul brought me the tape, was trying to get a gig. But he got a gig and a record deal at the same time.
I think I've read that the first Replacements gig was actually, ironically, a sober club.
They'd never played a real bona fide rock club before we got together. They played a couple places. They were sort of taken under the wing of a band called the Dads, who were a sober band back in the day, and the only sober people I knew, to be honest. But they played this club, the Longhorn, quite a lot, and they were good guys, and they were a good band. But they had taken the Replacements under their wing, and they played places in the suburbs like, keggers and things like that, and house parties. So, but they had gotten a gig in a sober club in downtown Minneapolis in a church. And that was actually supposed to be the first gig that I saw. And as I walked up I remember walking up the stairs to the church, and there was this kid sitting near the top of the stairs, kind of looking dejected with his head hanging down. As I walked by, he said, "Are you Pete?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, I'm Chris, I'm the drummer. We ain't gonna play, we got kicked out." And I didn't know why initially, and then Paul walked out, and I recognized him from the store, and he had Bob Stinson with him. And he introduced me to Bob, and he said, "Yeah, they found liquor and pills in our stuff, and they were not happy about it." And the guy had actually said, "I'll make sure you guys never play Minneapolis again," which of course didn't happen. But so that was
They were causing trouble from the start, I guess.
Yeah. But they, it was a funny deal because I think they thought they'd blown an opportunity, and I hate to admit it because it's not, sobriety or lack of sobriety is not anything to laugh about. But at the same time, when I walked away, I kind of chuckled, and I thought, well, this is sort of humorous to me, and they sure didn't scare me off.
Well, I mean, I think I've read that when you obviously had such conviction about this band, like you said, within the first 20, 30 seconds of hearing that tape, but a lot of people in the scene, you're already very entrenched in the Minneapolis scene, sort of were mocking or laughing at you, like, what are you doing with this band with a 13-year-old bass player? Like, they didn't take the Replacements seriously, but you saw the potential that a lot of people think manifested itself on Let It Be, like, from the very start.
It was a slow growing awareness of their talent, I think. But at the beginning, I was just so knocked out with what I heard. I thought this is certainly something to go after, and certainly something to see what we could do. I didn't really necessarily think that. Actually, I'll tell you, at one point, I remember somebody giving me a hard time about how much I was blabbing about them, and I said, you hang on for a second, someday people are going to be writing books about these guys. And it was probably, inflated hyperbole in my part at the time, but at the same time, I think deep down I had an inkling.
It's very cool. Obviously, how many books have there been about the Replacements? Not counting yours, which is about them and other things.
3 or 4, kind of
3 or 4. It's pretty cool. So we get to Let It Be, which, like I said, is sort of a whole new level for the band. And at that time, it overlapped with, you were road managing for REM.
Right. Well, before we went into the studio to start Let It Be, I had gotten an offer to do some road managing work for REM in between replacement states. And, REM had been playing Minneapolis for a couple of years by then, and they really took the town by storm. I mean, we had, at our record store, we probably went through, I'd say, 400 or 500 of those Hip Tone singles, the Radio Free Europe record, before they even signed to IRS. So first time they came to Minneapolis, they had almost 100 people, and they didn't have that many people in a lot of the towns they were going to. So they connected it with the record store, being a large part of the reason there were so many people there, and then we got to be friendly, and Peter and I are very similar people, and he ended up crashing on my couch many times and staying up till the sun came up listening to records, because that's what we love to do. So he offered me this temporary road manager position, and I thought, well, this would be great to do, but I can't do it unless the replacements are cool with it, because they're my priority, obviously. And so we had a meeting, and I explained the situation, and they all said, hey, this is cool, go ahead and do it. I had kind of explained it as, it might be something that would, they were a few rungs up the ladder from what the replacements were doing, so maybe it would be an opportunity for me to kind of learn the ropes, and meet people that were in, higher positions. And so I presented to the band that way, and they said, yeah, we can do it. We had 2 roadies that could take care of the band when I wasn't there on the road dates, and I still kept up with all the other management stuff and the, advanced bookings for, tours down the road and stuff. And then they kind of changed their tune, or Paul did. The other guys didn't really, but it was Paul who, I think, looking back on it, I think it was, he wanted to be number one, and it hurt his feelings that I was paying attention to somebody else, I think, to some degree. So anyway, that made it a little tough there for a bit. But what happened was the songs, as you're saying, had started to advance at such a rapid rate, and I recognized it, and I thought, Paul's having some kind of a breakthrough. This is, he's gone up several levels here very quickly, and I think he recognized that I recognized it. And so that brought us back together, I think, and we were probably closer during the making of Let It Be than we had been even before.
And then Peter Buck was involved in this record. I don't know if it was an urban legend that he was at one point tapped to produce it. He didn't produce it, but he was involved. He did play guitar on I Will Dare.
He did. He was never really on the bubble to produce, and we hadn't really talked about somebody from the outside coming in necessarily. And he... I don't even know if he was really thinking he was going to produce. He just wanted to come and hang out for the recording session. So that's why we put a guitar in his hand when Bob Stinson was having a little bit of trouble playing the right kind of solo. Bob himself even didn't feel like he was nailing the right kind of solo. So it wasn't like Westerberg said, hey, you're out, Peter's in, kind of thing. It was like Bob stepped aside and said, yeah, go ahead, let him try it. Peter did the solo, and it was the right thing.
And the rest was history. I actually have kind of a lightning round of songs I specifically want to ask about. Please feel free to volunteer any other songs you want to talk about. But obviously I wanted to ask about I Will Dare, and you talked about the fact that that Bob ended up not doing the solo and Peter did. But I've read that this was the song where, because Paul had that song I Will Dare for a while. It was supposed to maybe be on Hootenanny, and he'd called you and been like, I've had a breakthrough, I've written the best song of my life, or right. What was that all about?
Yeah, he called up as we had just finished Hootenanny and sent off the audio to the pressing plant and the package to the printer. And a couple days later, he called and said, I've just written the best song I've ever written, and we need to, pull the record back and add it. And I just said, we couldn't do that. We'd have to, it would cost a fortune to, kill the project, and it would delay it, and we'd be, it would slow the whole project down. So he was not happy about it, but he understood, I think, deep down, and so we held it from the record. But it was, I think, the first thing we recorded when we started the recording of Let It Be. And I'd been out on the road with REM. Literally flew in from a gig at Six Flags in Georgia on a Friday night. Took a red eye home, got a couple hours of sleep, and then jumped in the van and picked up the band and drove to the recording studio. So, and then Peter flew in a couple days later. In fact, I brought a couple of his guitars with me, which was also, to add to my luggage. I'm trying to manage all this other stuff, and I thought, oh man, I've got the Rickenbackers with me here, and I didn't want to see somebody, steal them or whatever. But anyway, so we started recording, and I Will Dare, came real fast because they had been doing it for close to a year by that time. And one of the interesting stories about it, I don't think we've talked about this too much in the other interviews we've done about this, but at one point, after Peter had done the guitar solo, Westerberg just said, God, it would sound kind of cool if there was a mandolin on this. And but he didn't seem real serious, but I kind of filed it away in the back of my head. And then my brother, older brother, was in a bluegrass band, and so he had a mandolin player. I called him up and I said, any chance I can rent your mandolin? And the Replacements didn't have the reputation they do now, or did then.
So he said yes.
Either good or for breaking things. But anyway, he trusted me with the thing. I gave him $10 to borrow to rent the mandolin from him. And the next day Paul and I were going to the studio, and I went to pick him up, and he looked in the back seat and saw this little case, and he said, "What's that?" And I said, "Well, it's a surprise for you." And he opened it up as we were driving and pulled it out, and he was sitting in the riding shotgun, picking up the mandolin, and I don't know if he'd ever played one before.
Wow.
So it was really cool, and he figured that part out real soon and real fast, and so that's how the mandolin ended up on there.
That's so cool. So yeah, good thing that the person said yes when you asked to rent it.
That's right.
So I said that Paul called you and said, "I've written my best song yet." When he eventually played it for you, what was your reaction? Were you like, "Oh, holy cow, you're right, like this is a whole new level," or did you agree with him?
I did. I mean, it was probably, I'm guessing he would have called me in February of '83. Hootenanny was out in April, so it was around that time frame. Anyway, so a couple weeks after he had called me, we had a show at a place called Goofy's Upper Deck in downtown Minneapolis, which was mostly a hardcore bar. But the Replacements were punky enough that they fit in, and we got booked there quite a lot. So I remember the set there being, strong, and we had a good crowd. And about 7, 8 songs into the show, I heard them start a song that I didn't recognize, a quick strummed kind of bouncy intro, and it kind of caught my ear because I knew their material so thoroughly. And as soon as the song kicked in, I suddenly went, "This is the one he called me about." I mean, it sounded like a hit to me. It really did. And I don't really think that way usually, and especially with a band like the Replacements. But I thought, man, he's written the song. This could be the one. So I was very excited about it. And then they continued to do it a lot live and fine-tune it. And in fact, I think by the time we started recording Let It Be, there were 6 songs that they'd been doing for, along with I Will Dare, for 5 plus I Will Dare, that they've been doing for about a year. So by the time we started recording, they were very well oiled and ready to go.
So another one I have to ask about, I think it's kind of crazy how long ago this song was written. It's Androgynous. Like Androgynous, I think, is more meaningful or as topical, if not more, today than when it came out in '84. And Joan Jett, I just saw Joan Jett play. She's covered it on record. It's always in her set. Yep. She did a version with Miley Cyrus and Laura Jane Grace, trans singer from Against Me, and it's been covered by Ezra Furman, actually, also another trans singer. And I just am very curious, first of all, what was the inspiration for it? It's obviously a real positive take on I guess what would now be called a gender neutral or gender queer couple. I don't know. Tell me if I'm wrong. But what was the inspiration for it, and also the reaction to it at that time?
I couldn't tell you what the inspiration was, and I didn't ask him, but I know that when Paul first played it for me, he was very surprised by it and a little nervous about it, and I was really surprised by it. He hadn't written anything like it. And as you know, from the beginning, when I first met him, it was all rockers. When I first met them, it was like they wanted to be Johnny Thunder's Heartbreakers. That was really their thing. First show I ever saw them do, they did 3 Johnny Thunder songs. But
do you remember which 3? I'm sorry to interject, but I'm a big Johnny Thunders fan.
I Want to Be Loved. I think it was called Get Off the Phone.
Get Off the Phone.
And one other one, and I can't tell you the
Was
name
it You Can't Put Your Arm Around a Memory? Because
No.
I know Tommy has covered it. Anyway,
not that. But,
go back to it. That's pretty cool. I didn't know that.
No problem. But when he started writing a little deeper songs, in particular on the first album, as we were, we had a whole pile of rockers to record, but all of a sudden we actually seen Johnny Thunders in Gang War, the band he was in with the gentleman from the MC5, and he was really messed up, and it was sad because he apparently didn't have enough of whatever substance it was that was keeping him up, and he did not play well, and it was it was really kind of because we were excited to see him, and he was kind of a hero, and then you sort of saw him fall on his face a little bit, and it was it was disturbing. The next day I talked to Paul on the phone, and we were just shooting the shit, and I said, "So what have you been doing?" And he said, "Oh, I wrote a new song." I said, "What's it called?" He said, "Johnny's Gonna Die." So at that time I didn't know what kind of song it was. When he brought it into the studio, I mean, it really stuck out, kind of like Androgynous did, because they hadn't written anything like it. It was his first ballad. So anyway, he does that on Sorry Ma. We did a song called Go on Stink, which was a little heavier and a little more writerly, I guess. And then Hootenanny had Within Your Reach and Willpower and some of those things. So by the time they got to Androgynous, even though there had been some outliers before, this one was a real outlier. And I mean, I don't know how to explain it really, but it was, they weren't necessarily the, I mean, it wasn't a song that anybody saw coming, I guess basically is what it was. And I mean, it just kind of came out of nowhere, and I think it was a very forward-thinking song, and certainly is getting a lot of attention now in this new package. So one of the things, it was the first song we released in advance, and we found another vocal that I didn't remember being there on the multi-tracks. When we've done the reissues in 2008 all on CD, we didn't have a budget to remix things and go back to the 24-track tapes, but this time we did have a bigger budget, so we were able to go back and pull all those songs apart and look for instruments and voices that weren't on the original that came out on the record. And when we found this other vocal, I was very excited. I think in a way it's maybe my favorite song on the record because of this other vocal. Clearly not a master, and I think we picked the right one for the album, but it's one that's got a lot of emotion in it, and I think it was very, very much worth putting in this package.
Sorry, I'm sort of asking the question again, but was there any kind of weird reaction to it when it came out from bros or whatever? I mean, it was a different time.
No, I don't remember any kind of bad reaction. I think people were I think the people were kind of excited by, the expansion of topic.
Yeah, well, I love the fact that when I'm sure you've seen Joan Jett do it, but she just did it at the forum, and she didn't just do it. She did this whole speech before about how Paul Westerberg is one of her favorite songwriters, and it was very cool. I do want to ask you about 16 Blue, because I remember in your memoir you talk about, obviously, about the awkward age Tommy was at that point.
Yep. That was a funny one, because I remember that, where that came from real specifically. We were on the road with REM, and we were in Boston, and we had a day off, and Westerberg said, could you find a place for us to rehearse? And that was something he'd never asked me to do before, and I thought, well, sure, of course, that's great. I'm glad they wanted to, and I didn't know why. So I called up our friends from the Del Fuegos, said, anybody who's got a practice, space that we could use? He said, sure, you can use ours. So we got the keys and loaded the gear in there for the afternoon, and I took off to do some other stuff and came back and got them later. And then we went to the Paradise in Boston, where they were opening for REM. And during sound check, they did this new song, and I thought, that's what Paul wanted the rehearsal for. He's got a new tune. And I remember walking around at sound check and hearing the words, and all of a sudden I went, holy shit, he's written a song about Tommy.
How did Tommy react to that? I assume he knew.
We didn't really talk about it. I mean, I think it was one of those things, everybody kind of everybody kind of got it. That's what it was about, but no, it wasn't something that was a big discussion point.
And then, I don't know, forgive me, I don't know if this is on the box set, but I know a B-side from that era was Hey Good Lookin'. Is that on this box set?
Hey Good Lookin' was, there was a live version on the flip of I Will Dare, the 12-inch. We had two songs on the flip, 20th Century Boy by T-Rex, and then the Hank Williams song. And yes, it is on this.
Okay, cool, because there's a whole story that was an Alex Chilton connection, which obviously later they had a song called Alex Chilton, but there's a really funny story about, there's like a big star Easter egg on the original B-side of
right,
that.
yeah. Well, that was funny because we had been in Madison, Wisconsin. There was a club there called Merlin's, second floor room, run by a husband and wife team who were really, really good people. And they loved the Replacements from the first time we went there was opening for Husker Du. And these two people, I should remember their names, it's not coming to me right now, but anyway, they took Shine to the Replacements and booked them a lot. So we went back and forth to Madison plenty. It was about a 5-hour drive from Minneapolis, and I think I've sort of, only half jokingly referred to it as the Replacements hamper. I mean, that's really where Madison was where they cut their teeth, because they were playing for people that didn't watch them, go through all their growing pains. And great club, great PA. And so somebody, I guess maybe one of our roadies, had thrown a tape in that had been a mixtape we had in the van in to record the show. And Hey Good Lookin', I think, was the last song they did. Maybe it was an encore. And so when we were, and at the show, I mean, Bob's solo is just so ridiculous. It sounds like he's playing the wrong song. But we thought it was really funny. And so on the way home in the van, I mean, this is another crazy thing. We used to go to Madison, play a show. We didn't have money for hotels or anything, so we'd drive back afterwards, you know, leave Madison at 2 in the morning. I'd be dropping them off when the sun came up. But anyway, as we're driving back, Westerberg, I think, was riding shotgun, and he kept playing the version of Hey Good Lookin', playing the solo and then rewinding it and playing the solo again and rewinding it and playing it again. And there was like this wrestling match in the van with Bob trying to get to the tape deck because he was going to chuck it out the window. So it was like hog pile on Bob, keep him away from that tape, and the tape made it home, fortunately. And so when we decided to put it on the B side of this 12-inch, Steve Felstead, the engineer, and I were transferring it from the cassette to a quarter-inch reel. And right when the Hey Good Lookin' live had ended, the mixtape that was on it previously popped out, and it was almost like it was meant to be. That was the beginning of track 1, side 1 of the first Big Star album. It's the song Feel. So you hear this dun 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 dun. And I thought, that's so cool. Let's just put on a few seconds of it and fade it out. And it'll be, like you say, a little Easter egg because Big Star everybody knows about Big Star now, but at the time they were not known at all. So it was our little tip of the hat. And interestingly enough, the next year, meeting Alex Chilton, he said that was the first thing he ever heard by them. He'd been driving from Memphis to New York and stopped at a friend's house in Baltimore to spend the night before he went up to the city. And the guy said, hey, do you know about this band, The Replacements? And Alex went, never heard of them. And he said, well, look what they've done here. And he played it for him, so that would have been his intro.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
What a great story. So we've mentioned that, obviously, The Replacements did cover. So I have to ask about Black Diamond, because this was 84, or when you were making it, it was maybe even 83. Like
early 84, but yeah.
This was before people were like ironically covering Kiss songs, or ironically liking Kiss, or unironically liking Kiss and just being like, Kiss kick ass. They might be cheesy, but they have had a lot of great rock songs. Like that was ahead of the curve in that way. So obviously Black Diamond's on this, and also I think Gene Simmons might have seen them do this in concert once.
Yeah, he came to CBGB's and we were. I was at the soundboard, and the guy who was doing sound was a guy who actually had worked out here at McCabe's and stuff. Robin Dinar. You know Robin Dinar? He's been around doing sound here for a long time. Great guy. Anyway, he was the sound guy at CBGB, and so he and I were at the soundboard, and it was it was actually not a great show, Alex Chilton was opening up. It was the first time we met him, and I think that the Replacements had a few extra cocktails because they were so excited, and it was a pretty messy show. And also, they'd just been on the cover of the Village Voice, so and there were a lot of A&R guys in New York that were like, who's this band we've never heard of who were on the cover of the Village Voice? So it was packed with
This was a common story, right, where they had a big show and they would not be at their best, but then they'd be at some other show playing for like 10 people, and it would be like the best show you ever saw in your life.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. But anyway, so while they were playing, Robin kind of nudged me and he said, there was a guy standing, the club was packed. I mean, it was wall to wall. And there was a tall guy standing sort of to our right. And he said, you know who that is? And I said, no. He said, Gene Simmons. And of course, I wouldn't
This would have been the year that his makeup came off. It came off in 83 on an MTV press conference, if you remember that.
I wouldn't have recognized him with his makeup on. But anyway, and there's a little talkback system at CB's. A lot of clubs have it where, there's a little microphone on the board that you can talk to the band through the monitors. And so when they finished a song, I hit the button and I said, Paul, Gene Simmons just walked in, no shit. And without missing a beat, they crashed into a really terrible version of Black Diamond.
Which is not a Gene Simmons penned Kiss song, if I'm not mistaken. I believe that's a Paul Stanley song. Do you think that maybe they should have done, a Gene song?
Well, I don't think they knew very many, but anyway, he turned and left very quickly.
He left?
He left, yeah.
Oh, man.
But you're right about it. I mean, the non-ironic part of it, because they also did Rock and Roll All Night, and I remember seeing them do that at another club in New York where there were, it was a big crowd, and they didn't know whether if the Replacements were making fun of it or whatever, but they just did such a great version of it that, you know, it didn't really matter. It was a great rock and roll song.
Yeah, I think now there are lots of people, particularly in a YouTube era or whatever, people cover stuff all the time. And I also think now, as cheesy or sometimes problematic as Kiss can be, I don't think most people have any problem saying Kiss are great or we're great or I love Kiss. But back then, especially, this was around the time when they reinvented themselves as kind of like a no makeup hair metal band. Like, it was not cool.
Yep.
To like Kiss. It was a risk. You know, now if like a rock band starts playing a Black Diamond on stage, everyone would be like, yeah, you know, but like the only bands that were probably doing that early were like the Replacements and Red Cross, who always went against the grain of what was considered cool, you know.
Could have been. And actually we recorded 4 covers during the Let It Be sessions. So we had to pick one, and we didn't, you know, we didn't want to put 2 covers on, but we thought one would be fun. And I think that the band was kind of leaning towards the T-Rex songs. They did a great version of 20th Century Boy.
What were the other 2, by the way?
Grassroots, Temptation Eyes, and Heartbeat, It's a Love Beat by the DeFranco family.
Which is something Red Cross would do. I mean, whatever. Like, it was before, like, maybe being into the 70s kitsch thing was, like, that was more of a 90s when that kind of came out.
Yep. But when we were kind of deciding, you know, what of all the tracks we recorded, what's going on the album, what order is it going to be, and all that stuff, I'm a good sequencer, so I was kind of trying to put it together, and I had the T-Rex song Tempt in there, and then I started thinking, I thought, you know, this is kind of obvious, you know, to put a T-Rex cover on here. So I said, when we had a little band chat about what songs, you know, various members liked and what they didn't like, and I said, you know, I think it'd be cooler to put on the Kiss song because it would be so unexpected, and so we ended up changing, you know, to that one, and I think it worked out really good, and put it at the end of side 1, and it was kind of in a good position for, you know, for the record, I thought.
Are all 4 covers on this deluxe edition?
They are.
Cool. I would like to hear that Heartbeat, It's a Love Beat. I don't think I've ever heard that.
It's really good.
So last song that I wanted to ask about on this record is, I mean, I have to ask about Unsatisfied, which is like, you know, considered to be one of their greatest songs. Because you were mentioning how Bob Stinson didn't do the solo on I Will Dare, but it was a complete opposite story with his guitar playing on this song.
He did a great guitar solo on this one, and it was that was a studio concoction, really. I think Paul had written it, brought it to the band, taught it to him, and they recorded it right away. And I don't think we even did more than one version. We had one good backing track. He took a couple of shots at the vocal, but there was only one really good vocal. But the interesting thing about that one was when we recorded it, it didn't have the acoustic guitar intro, and we didn't use things like click tracks or anything. So, and there was no count in. And so when all of a sudden Paul said he wanted to put a 12 string at the beginning, it was really difficult to record the 12 string and then line it up so it sounded like, you know, sounded right. There was something else I was going to say about Unsatisfied. Oh, interesting thing about that, I remember after the record was out, we were driving through, I remember somewhere down Kentucky or Tennessee, on a 2-lane road, stopped to get gas. There was a payphone across the street, so while the van was gassing up, I ran across to call back to the office in Minneapolis to, you know, just check in, any names for the guest list tonight, that kind of stuff. And Dave Ayers was a guy who was doing some A&R while I was away so much with the Replacements, and Dave said, hey, we got a call from Debbie Miller, writer from Rolling Stone. She loves the album, and they're going to review it, but she doesn't understand one lyric. And she wanted to know if I could tell her what it was. I said, I don't know, but I'll ask, you know, the band or Peter or whatever. So he said, it's the line, everything you dream of is right in front of you, but she couldn't figure out what he said right after that. So I'm standing there in the payphone booth, and I'm looking across the street, and there's, you know, the van getting gassed up, and there's Westerberg standing a couple feet from the van, smoking, of course, you know, which is like, good idea while in front of the gas pumps. But anyway, so I shout across the street. I said, hey, Paul, Rolling Stone's reviewing the album. They don't understand this lyric. Everything you dream of is right in front of you. What do you say after that? And he shouts, liberty is a lie, from across the highway. And I didn't know what that line was either. And I thought, that's a fucking great line. So I read it into the phone, and Debbie Miller put it in her review.
Is that song Unsatisfied? I have read that it's at least partially about Paul's frustration with where the band was at that time in terms of, some people might have thought that a band that had this reputation for being whatever, difficult or inconsistent with their live shows didn't want success, didn't want to be famous, but I feel that he did. Or tell me about, like, did that factor into the song at all? Because I've read that.
Yeah, well, again, I mean, Paul and I didn't really, there wasn't a lot of talk about, like, where did this song come from? What did you mean? What were you feeling, Paul? Those were not conversations we had. So, but it was a song that I think, I was shocked, and I'm shocked to this day, that it took them 4 albums before the major labels really got serious about coming after them. So I think if you're Paul Westerberg and you're writing Color Me Impressed and, I Will Dare and Unsatisfied, and you're not getting the kind of attention that you think you should be getting, you're probably not very satisfied. So I'm sure that's part of it, but yeah, I couldn't tell you really the origin of the feeling.
No worries. I mean, obviously, the Replacements got to a certain level of success, a type of success that many bands would be thrilled to have.
Yeah.
4 books written about them. They've been nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, not inducted yet, but maybe someday.
Well, that was all later, though, too.
Right, but at the time, now we look back and obviously the critics loved them, particularly with, as you mentioned, this Debbie Miller woman from Rolling Stone. But with the fact that the songwriting had elevated, and the fact that you had a song called I Will Dare, which the first time you heard it, you're like, that's a hit, and this was getting the acclaim. Did you guys think, even in the back of your minds, like, this is the album, this is the one that's going to do it? Because then, they did get signed to a major after this one. They did move to Sire, so I assume this record did attract attention of Seymour Stein or whoever. But were you thinking, like, okay, now things are going to happen?
I don't know that was really the way we thought. I think that everybody wanted to be more successful. Everybody wanted to have, be making a better living or whatever. But the idea was just to make the best records we could, and to do the best, and to tour as much as we could. And even though they did a lot of shows that were falling down drunk, I mean, they didn't, go out there on purpose to do a shitty show. It was just kind of the luck of the draw. There's something cool about that, in a way that, they couldn't fake it. And so on a night where, the chemistry wasn't there on stage, sometimes they'd maybe flush it down the toilet a little bit and just be goofy. Or we played a lot of places where there were, big punk rock audiences, and they'd do everything country style, just to piss them off. And this is just...
Did that piss you off sometimes? Like, here you are, this manager who's believed in him since the first 20 seconds of this demo tape, and you're like, you just were on the cover of the Village Voice. All these people here. See, but you seen Gene Simmons, not that you cared about that one, but you know what I mean? Like, this is a big show.
Yeah.
And there are probably many other versions of that story. Like, this is a big show. And then they do not present themselves at what they can do at their best.
Well, if you got a bunch of people standing in front of you saying, this is what we want, this is what we expect from you, they are the kind of band that's going to go the other way. I mean, that's just the way they work.
That didn't frustrate you as someone who...
No, not really. I mean, I was frustrated when... I was more frustrated when they just played shows that sucked, and I knew that they were much better than that.
I guess that's what I was asking.
But I know, you probably have the same experience. There's a lot of bands that we all see where, they go out and they're great every night, like a Bruce Springsteen kind of thing. They give it their all every night, and not everybody can do that. And so, in a way, I mean, I kind of admired them for not playing the game in those ways.
But it has been brought up many times that if they had played the game more, and this goes beyond Let It Be, I mean, it goes to like The Bastards of Young video, which is of course now a classic, but was them not playing the MTV game.
Right.
There are some people that were like, guys, if you just played the game a little bit more, the world could have been your oyster. I don't know if that's something any of them or you have ever grappled with.
I'm sure everybody thinks about it, but it would, we might not be talking about them had they done that kind of thing. If they had,
the books would have been less interesting.
I think of the 8 records they made, Don't Tell a Soul is the one where they really did try to play the radio game and all that, and I think that's their least interesting album, and I think it's got some real duds songs on it.
I mean, the singles
personally.
on it. No, that's fair enough. I'm going to put you on the spot. This doesn't have to be just the era of Let It Be, but given the fact that you never knew what you were going to get with them. What is, in your opinion, the best show you ever saw them do? And, just for kicks, the worst?
There were a lot of shows that were, the worst is probably, there's plenty of those. But also, the thing is, when I think about it, I saw them hundreds of times, and they were great more than they were bad. I know, like a musician, I know Joe Henry, who, when I met him, he said he was a big Replacements fan, and he saw them 8 or 10 times and never saw them do a good show. Well, that's too bad. I'm sorry about that, but I'm glad you like the records,
He gave them a lot of chances.
But I guess I remember after the CB show where Gene Simmons turned up, the reason we had to play CB's was because we'd been booked in a bigger room about a week and a half later called Irving Plaza, and that was a big deal at the time. And we'd done CB's a lot and did really well there. CB's was booked first, and so when we got the Irving Plaza gig, Irving Plaza said, well, there's a no-compete, so you can't do this show. And I said, well, what if we do the show, under a fake name? And they said that'd be okay. So the Replacements actually played as Gary and the Boners, which wasn't really all that much of a secret.
People figured it out,
Oddly enough, Alex Chilton, who was just coming out of retirement, said, well, if they're going to play under a fake name, I am too. So he played as the Deteriorating Situations. The Replacements had to convince Hilly Crystal that, look, there's going to be a huge crowd, you're going to sell lots of liquor, can we do this under a fake name? And he and I got along really well. He'd never liked the Replacements, but for some reason he and I always had a good relationship, and he said, Peter, I'll do this for you. So we ended up a week and a half later going to Irving Plaza, and it was like they had something to prove because they knew they'd kind of done pulled a bad show a week and a half before. And they walked on stage and opened with Rock and Roll All Night.
And Gene Simmons was not there.
And they just killed it. And that was a brilliant show all the way through. So that would be one of the best. I thought the Irving Plaza shows were great. There's also a club in Trenton, New Jersey, and there's a bonus 10-inch that comes with this package, this new Let It Be package, that has 6 songs from a recording in Trenton, New Jersey at a place called City Gardens. That was another one where the PA was so good, the monitors were so good, they could really hear themselves, and they played their asses off every time they were there, I think. Some drunk shows, of course, too, but...
I think probably the bad shows are the ones that people remember more, because that was part of their lore, as you said.
Well, it became more of their lore, and it is kind of a frustrating thing where, people will come up to, a band member or me or whatever and say, yeah, I remember seeing them in Tulsa, and you're so drunk you couldn't play any of your own songs, and that was so great. And it's like, well, that wasn't really why the Replacements were great, to me, but,
So a couple of obvious questions to ask about the lore is, of course, the title, which some people maybe at the time, Let It Be, would think was blasphemous. It was also before the internet, where having an album called Let It Be would maybe make the album be hard to find online or whatever, but I do believe that it was at least partially inspired by you and your Beatles fandom to call it that.
I think it was needling me a little bit. Westerberg used to say, they're a great rock band, but they're not the be-all and end-all. And
the Beatles, that is.
Yeah, and I said, no, they are the be-all and end-all. You are wrong. So, but I think what happened was I think they probably were sitting at the CC Club, which was the bar kitty corner from our record store where we all hung out all the time. And I think for some reason, all of the previous records had about 20 titles before we decided on what the final one was. But this one didn't, I don't remember any titles floating around, and so Paul was it's time to get a title, and he's sitting at the table with a couple of the band members, and he said, okay, the next song that comes on the jukebox is going to be the album title. And there it was, the Beatles' Let It Be.
Let It Be.
Yeah.
Very cool. What was the next song that played?
Yeah, good question.
Because if it had skipped, who knows what we would be talking about.
The other thing that I think was when we started making the next record, the first for Sire, right up until the last minute, it was going to be called Let It Bleed. And I thought that would have just been the coolest thing to have Let It Be and followed up with Let It Bleed. And then he just, at the last minute, he said, no, I'm going to call the album Tim. And I was like, why? And he said, it's such a nice name. And I was like, oh, man, I think that's a missed opportunity.
I agree. I know we're here talking about Let It Be, but I always assumed there was a real life Tim, like it was dedicated to someone.
There was a couple of Tims around at that time. Probably a guy named Tim Carr, who was a booker at the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis and a friend of the band and lived in the apartment building I lived in, so they knew him as well. I always thought it could have been Tim, but I don't know. I don't ask Paul those kind of questions.
And of course, I have to ask about the famous cover photo. I know you weren't there at the shoot, but it's a really iconic photo on the Stinson family roof. And I think there were maybe some other options for alternate photos, but that was the one that made the cut.
Yeah, there's one on the posters that they have here. This was another Corrigan picture. This was really going to be the album cover for a long time. Not for a long time, but towards, as we were putting the package together. But I don't know, it was something about this this picture. I think I was working at the record store that day that they took the pictures, just a couple blocks really from where that house is. And Dan Corrigan, we had done 2 photo shoots, one with Greg Helgeson, who did a lot of the early pictures, and then Dan Corrigan was a brand new photographer at that time. And one of the guys that we worked with at Twin Tone had said, you should maybe take some pictures at their practice space, because that's where they really became a band. And so Corrigan was shooting them there, and then he said, well, let's go outside. And then all of a sudden I don't even remember who brought it. It was his idea. They got up on the roof, crawled through. That's their older sister Lonnie's bedroom window there, and her baseball trophies in the window. So they crawled out the window and got on the roof and snapped those pictures. And when we were looking at the contact sheets, this one everybody just went, wow. And I mean, I love that picture too, and I think that's one of the best Replacements pictures ever. But this really caught everybody's attention, and we had a great art director for most of the Replacements records. His name was Bruce Allen, and he was the lead guitar player of another Twin Tone band called the Suburbs. And so when he framed this and tinted it blue and came up with the kind of red-orange lettering and the sideways and the Let It Be kind of set down there over Paul's shoe. I mean, it was like, there's your fucking album cover right there.
Didn't Grant from Husker do some graphic design for them?
He did the cover of Hootenanny as under the name Fake Name Graphics.
How come he didn't use his real name?
I don't know, just for the heck of it.
Why not? Why not?
Grant was like that.
Another amazing Minneapolis band.
Amazing guy.
And I got to work with Grant as well, because Nova Mob was on Restless
Right.
Twin Tone.
Right.
Very cool. So I'm gonna take some questions from you guys. I'm so glad we had such a nice turnout. It's so cool. Thank you for coming, especially when the weather wasn't great. But you were saying that maybe now we all understand the Replacements, that they're appreciated now. At the time when I was asking about Unsatisfied, maybe that wasn't happening, and they might have, but now they've made history. I know that your tape, the 1980 demo tape, it's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Museum in Cleveland, right?
It is.
Do you think they're ever going to get in the Hall of Fame? They got and would they care? Would they show up?
I mean,
2014 was their only nomination.
Right, they nominated once. Tommy and I did a thing for my book there last year, and it turns out the 2 directors of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame are Replacements fanatics. I mean, they were so kind to us, and they gave us like a 2-hour private tour of the museum, and couldn't have been nicer. Turned out the main guy, God, I'm going to blank on his name now.
John
Terrible.
Sykes?
No.
From the museum.
Greg. I can't think of his last name. Anyway, sweet as could be. It turned out he used to road manage Ben Vaughn, who opened for the Replacements several times, so we were probably sharing dressing rooms. So I would have met him a whole lot, many years ago.
Who would induct the Replacements besides you? Because you want to do it?
I would say Matt Dillon, but yes.
I was kind of
Jeremy could do it.
Yeah, I'll do it.
I'll do it. No, you should do it. I was kind of thinking actually Billy Joe Armstrong, just because he, is the name that the Hall cares about already an inductee, but he performed with them at Coachella.
Yep.
When Paul something was wrong with his back. I forget exactly what was going on. Paul was on a couch.
Yeah.
And Billy Joe was in the front, which I thought was very Replacements-esque.
Yeah.
But anyway, I know we've been doing this for a while. I have a feeling all of you guys would just love for this conversation to keep going, but I want to make sure we get to your questions. But I'm just going to lightning round, because I was saying now people appreciate them on a wider scale, but they had a lot of accolades. So I'm going to lightning round this and see what you agree. So Robert Christgau said this album, along with X's Wild Gift, represented the peak of American indie rock. Do you agree? And if so, why?
I think it's right. I would say right up there. I mean, harder from my perspective. I mean, I don't want to be self-congratulatory about it, but I think it's that year. It was one of the and one of the defining records of indie rock back then. Yeah, for sure.
It's also been called by some critics the greatest coming-of-age album of all time. Any thoughts about that? Because, obviously Tommy was 16, I guess, but they were all really young at the time. And
yeah, 16 going on 17. But yeah, I mean, I think one of the other things about this new package I'm really excited about is the liner notes written by this woman, Elizabeth Nelson, writer from the East Coast, who I think we were just so fortunate to get. And she basically... puts them in the pantheon of, like as she says in the liner notes, encourage you to read them. I mean, they're really absolutely brilliant. If she doesn't get nominated for a Grammy, I'm going to be really shocked. But she said that to her, they most resemble the British art school bands, the Kinks and the Who. And I think that...
They've been called the American Kinks. I've read that.
Yeah. So, and I don't think, obviously the songs don't sound the same exactly, but I think there's something about it that they had the big rock and roll part of their sound, but they also had the sensitivity that was underneath it and the ballads and whatnot. So I think that was a really apt comparison, and I loved reading that.
I'm so glad you mentioned Elizabeth Nelson, because that was literally my next and last question, just in terms of how they've been historically perceived, because I think this was really interesting. I'm going to quote her. So she wrote in these liner notes, "The Replacements were the ultimate rebuke to masculine punk, and Let It Be at its core is a record for girls," which I love that, because I think a lot of people think of the Replacements or Paul as being like a band for bros, like for dudes. And I will admit it, when I've gone to see Paul or any of Tommy's project, it is more men. It's more guys. But there's a lot of girls that love the Replacements, and Paul's lyrics could be very sensitive, so I love the fact that she pointed out this was not just a band for dudes.
Yep.
So, I'd love your thoughts on that specifically.
Well, she was, we'd had Bob Merritt done the liner notes for all of the sets in this series that really began with the Maxwell's live record in 2014. And, Bob Merritt's fantastic. He wrote the book. Talk about cementing a band's legacy. It was, we have...
and he's up for a Grammy this year as well.
Again, for Wilco, yeah. Wilco liner notes. But he wanted to take a little break from, he'd been working so much on the Replacements. I think he researched the Trouble Boys biography almost 7 years. So, and he's looking for what his next book is going to be. He's also writing a lot for the New York Times. And he wanted to take a break. And actually, when we started the project, I thought he was going to be part of it. I thought he would write some liner notes. But I thought, in addition to whatever Bob came up with, I thought it would be interesting to bring in another voice, and I thought about David Fricke would be a great choice, because I admire his writing so much and have for so many years. But then I had been reading Elizabeth's work. It kept popping up on my inbox one way or another on Instagram or whatever. I would hear somebody raving about a review that was written, and I couldn't believe how good the writing was. And I think Bob Merritt's a little bit more of a reporter. And that's not a negative comment, just he writes more in that style. That's where he came from. He's from the newspaper background. But Elizabeth has a thing that's, there's something a little more, I don't know what the word would be.
That stood out to me, that she pointed that out. I thought that was very cool.
I thought it made sense, and I don't know that I'd really thought about it. I didn't ever really think they were a guys band necessarily. I just thought that they were a band for people who really paid attention to good songwriting and like to have a laugh,
Mm-hmm. Since you mentioned Bob Dylan, and obviously there was the Timothée Chalamet movie, you ever think there's going to be a Replacements biopic? Has there been talks of one that you know of?
Well, there have been several. The book has been optioned a couple times. It was optioned by Josh Green, who did The Fault in Our Stars. And he was determined. He promised. He said, "This is my next movie." He had done an X-Men movie, and he'd done a 10 episode limited series with Stephen King of The Stand. So he had made a lot of money, and said he was going to do his pet project. And actually came to my house, and we talked a lot about it. But it just couldn't get the film companies to agree with them and come up with financing. I mean, Cameron Crowe came on board as a producer. And anyway, that went away, and then the rights went back to Bob Mayer, but now they've been optioned again by Finn Wolfhard.
Oh, no way. He's very cool, by the way. He has really good musical taste.
Uh-huh.
Wow, who's going to play you?
Yeah, I don't even want to think about it. And maybe there won't be a manager in the movie, I don't know.
No, they cannot write you out of the story.
So anyway, right now it looks like it's something that's very real. I was kind of glad when the idea of a biopic went away, because I thought, how many good ones have you ever seen? I mean, I haven't seen many.
I've seen a few.
So, yeah.
But yeah, when they're bad, when they get it wrong, they get it really wrong.
And there's way more bad ones than good ones, if you ask me. And I think, maybe, who knows? But, I think Bob Mayer will be involved in the screenplay or whatever it is, the script, and keep them on the straight and narrow. And I also, the impression I get is that Finn Wolfhard is a fanatic for the band, and that he wants to make it real and true. And so maybe that would be maybe it would be a good one.
Maybe he can induct them into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Maybe he could.
For that, get that younger audience.
That's
All
right.
Thank you so much. This is me. I thought I knew a lot about your career and about the Replacements, but I learned a lot today. I hope you guys did as well. Do we have any questions from the audience? Raise your hand. Don't be shy.
Nope.
No?
I'm someone who became obsessed with them after reading Trouble Boys a few years ago, and so for people like me who are only discovering them now, or anybody else, obviously, like the legend is that they weren't appreciated as much in their time. Do you know if they feel that they feel like they're getting their due, lack of a better word, satisfied with like how they're perceived, or like people showing up at their big reunion concerts 10 years ago? Like, do they feel that love?
Yeah, they definitely could. I mean, the fact that they were able to do, to do late night TV and really nail it. I mean, that version of Alex Chilton just killed me. I just couldn't believe that they were so good on TV. I was there when they did Saturday Night Live, and although I thought that was good, it was no fun. It was really an ugly situation. We were really treated poorly. I mean, the Saturday Night Live people didn't know who they were. They treated us like shit, to be honest. So I think that in particular, a couple funny things have happened recently. Like Chris Mars just came out of the retirement of doing interviews and decided he wanted to help. He just said, "Man, you guys have been working so hard on these reissues. They look so nice. I can really feel the love that you put into these. And I guess I want to talk to the press." So he actually did an interview with the Washington Post last Sunday, and it came out today, and he said some really great things. And Westerberg doesn't want to talk to the press, and that's okay. That's his prerogative. But since Chris did, Tommy said, originally he didn't want to talk to the press, that Paul wasn't gonna, but if Chris is gonna, he said sure, so Tommy talked to him too. And it's a nice piece written by Jeff Edgers, a longtime writer out there, so that was cool. But I know that, Tommy and I are in touch more than the other guys. Don't talk to Paul much at all these days, but and Chris and I are in touch, every couple months or whatever. But Tommy and I are in touch a couple times a week, and we do a lot of work together still. And he's the one that's out there playing, and he sees it everywhere he goes. I mean, he was really generous to me when I wrote a book a couple years ago, and so we did I did 20 cities around the country, just, wherever there was interest, I would go do it. And Tommy came to 10 of them with me. And there would be times where we'd be sitting at the table waiting to sign books, and people would be walking up, with some Replacements records to sign. And I'd see, like people shaking, as they were, about to talk to Tommy Stinson. And it really, that just for me, incredibly gratifying. And I think he feels that too. And so, I think that they feel like they are recognized, and the fact that they're still so relevant. I mean, we call it, my wife and I, Jennifer and I, we call it the long arm of the Replacements. It just goes on and on and on. And our son is working in music now, and he said every couple of days some kind of door opens for him, because they go, "Wow, you're related to the guy who did the Replacement stuff?" And it's like, wow. I mean, it's like, we kind of laugh about it. It's like you meet some new person, and guess who their favorite band is? The Replacements. It's like, holy cow. So it's like they're more popular now than they were when they were together. But at the same time, there was we built up things to a point. First couple of years we didn't get out of town a whole lot, but once we really got out of town and on the road, the audiences found them, and we, it was, if you were in Wichita and you were playing for 15 people who loved it, that was great. And a lot of times, you'd be in, New York City, and you'd have, 200 people there that were kind of sitting there going like this, prove it to me. So I think that, they had an audience all along, and they appreciated it. And so, yeah, I think they have come around to the fact that they made an impact, and it's a lasting one. And that's really something else. Because it doesn't happen to everybody.
Any other?
Yeah, so I think they came to California for the first time in '83.
Yep, fall of '83, October of '83.
Did you chaperone that trip?
I did.
Can you tell us about that experience?
First gig here was Club Lingerie. Then we kind of did some things where we went up to the Bay Area and came back down, but I think it was Club Lingerie, Music Machine, which was out on Pico, sort of by the 10 there, just kind of by McCabe's. That was a great club. A picture in this set of them on stage at the Music Machine, as a matter of fact. And also a place right in Hollywood, sort of by where Amoeba, the new Amoeba is. It was the basement at Selma and Ivar, I think. I think it was called the China Club for a while, but this was
Cathay de Grand.
Well, right, it was Cathay de Grand.
Yeah.
Was that a name that they used in different clubs around town?
No, that Cathay de Grand was right there on Selma.
Okay,
and
I thought that was just a name that was
Argyle.
mobile, because I remember it as the China Club at some point too. But anyway,
Yeah.
there was a show there, and it was pretty good. And then the booker invited us to come back, and I think we did another show there on Thanksgiving night with Social Distortion. But the first one was with Top Jimmy and his Rhythm Pigs.
No way.
Yeah, right by Restless, by that building we worked together
Restless
at.
was like half a block away from. It
Yeah.
was the China Club at that time.
Yeah. And then trying to think of where else, what other rooms.
Do you remember who was on the bill at the Club Lingerie show? Was it like local
I
band?
have it in notes in a calendar, an old calendar, but I don't remember off the top of my head. There were two openers, and there's a bootleg of it too that mentions who the openers are. I can't remember, but yeah.
Peter, what about the place that they played, and then the guy took the drink out of Tommy's hand?
Oh yeah, that was Azusa. We had a gig, got booked into like a steakhouse or something. It was really weird. But we went out there, and I remember meeting the owner, and it was like he looked like a Marine. He had like a buzz cut, and he looked kind of chunky, and I was just like, whoa, this guy doesn't look like a replacements friendly guy. And they were aware that Tommy was underage, and they were giving me the, kind of reading me the rules or whatever. And I said, he's not drinking at that time. And so he hadn't really kicked into gear on the alcohol yet. And I said, you don't need to worry about it. And so we thought, okay, well, it was a fairly decent paying gig, and we thought the vibe of the place was all weird, but what the heck. And so they sound checked and everything was fine. And then this owner had sent waitresses out to spy on Tommy, and so at some point one of the waitresses came up and grabbed the drink out of his hand and smelled it, and it was like it was pop or water or whatever, and Tommy was like embarrassed. And then it happened a second time, and then all of a sudden Westerberg pulled me aside and he said, I don't like these people here, they're not treating us very well, and I want to leave. And I was like going, oh boy, okay, well I kind of wanted to leave too. So I said, this was by this time the band had decided that they weren't going to tear down their equipment, and so me and the two roadies had to do all that. But I said to Paul, I said if you want to leave, I'm with you. I agree, these people are treating us badly and we got to go, but you got to help tear down. We got to do it fast because this guy's not going to be happy. So we did. We just took everything apart fast, filled up the van as it started to get around the club and it came to the guy's attention, he was screaming and shouting. There were about maybe 30 or 40 people that had come out from LA, and they were all gathered around in the parking lot, and we got like an ovation as we stormed out and drove away, and they were standing there clapping while the owner was.
Did you at least get steak dinners out of the deal?
We did. I don't think.
Did you get to eat some steak?
I don't think so.
Man.
It might not have been a steakhouse; just looked like one.
Any other? We got one over there.
Yeah, an always bringing a song for Dan, especially like some of those more writerly songs, as you call it. Would you ever get any pushback from the other members?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There's a song. In fact, another cool part of this package is there's a live recording on this 10-inch from City Gardens in Trenton, New Jersey that I was mentioning, called "You're Getting Married," and it was a demo that he gave me in 1981, and it was actually, some of you might know it because we put it on as a bonus track on the Stink record when we did the CD reissues in 2008. But anyway. That song, when he gave it to me, I mean, he was slipping me these demos that were piano demos and acoustic guitar demos that he'd recorded in his parents' basement. And basically I was sworn to secrecy, especially don't tell Bob, because Bob's going to think I'm a pussy, And but he would bring these things over. A lot of times it would be in the middle of the night or late at night. And I remember him calling one time, and he said, "I just wrote this song, and I sang the whole thing in falsetto. I got to get it out of the house right now, or I'm gonna erase it." And and he lived about 20 blocks away from me, and he must have run the whole way. Anyway, he gave me the tape, and it was a song called "You Hold Me in Suspension," which he's never given me permission to release on one of these sets. But oh my God, what a great song! One of his greatest lyrics, he sings, "You hold me in suspension." He goes, "All paint chips and all love fades."
Why no permission to release?
Just because I think it's just one that's a little too personal for him. So anyway, when You're Getting Married came along, that was one that just lit me up. I was actually a little bit frightened when I heard the song because I thought it was so great. I thought, how does a fucking 19-year-old kid write something like this? It had to have been about a real person. Again, I never asked him. But anyway, so those were the kinds of things that were happening. And I remember we tried... because I loved the song so much, I kept bringing it up to Paul. Like we snuck "If Only You Were Lonely" on the B-side of "I'm in Trouble" of the 45, and that worked well. So I said, hey, in the right spot, one of your solo songs could be cool. Show how the breadth of your writing ability. So, but anyway, so by the time we were doing Hootenanny out in the warehouse in North Minneapolis, they tried You're Getting Married, and it was one of the times very specifically to remember exactly what you're asking about, because Bob purposely played badly. And then when it was over, I remember him, in fact, it might even be on tape, he said, "Save that for your solo album, Paul, that ain't the Replacements." Yeah, because Bob wanted to rock, And I get it. I did too.
How many more questions do you want to take?
I can take this if
All right, we'll just keep going. Over here.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah, hey, Peter. I just wanted to chime in about Peter being the fifth replacement. I think it's a very apt thing for him. And, many people think it's because they were self-destructive and you held them together, but I see it differently. I was lucky enough to be a college student in Minneapolis in the early 80s and saw the Replacements quite a few times. And they just got so disheartened because every time they would play after a really good review, and they would play in a place that had about this many fans for 3 years. And I think that was so tough on them, and that's why the Unsatisfied and even maybe Favorite Thing. But Peter, he had to give them pep talks. I imagine just, because he believed in them, they would never have survived. And it wasn't their drinking. It was just that, it was a tough era, those early 80s.
Lack of recognition.
University of Minnesota would not play them on their radio station. The whole college radio scene had not really started. So he definitely was the fifth replacement, and also, people don't give him enough credit for holding that band together.
That's very kind of you. And let me tell you, Mike Hager, very, very nice of you to say that. I appreciate that. Mike Hager was writing for the Minnesota Daily, the A&E section, and actually met us in New York the very first time we went to New York in April of '83, and wrote a cover story for the Minnesota Daily, and I still have it. The headline was "Native Sons Rise in the East." That was a great title.
I didn't write the title.
Yeah.
He wrote the article, and that's what matters.
But it was a great story, and Mike's a great writer and a great man.
But I want to piggyback onto that question real quick. Do you have memories of these pep talks that you gave? Did you do that?
Well, I mean,
You're like, come on, boys.
I had just unfailing belief in their greatness. I mean, it's not anything like I planned it. I mean, it was just I couldn't help it. I just thought, it wasn't like
Did you have to talk them out of breaking up or anything like that?
No. It was. I mean, I think that they just get frustrated. I mean, no, they wanted to be a band, and they kind of grew into this. The fourth record for Twin Tone. I mean, I think that's another thing Elizabeth Nelson says in the liner notes. She said they were so good at that time that it was impossible for them. She said it was. I think she said it would be like the Rolling Stones in 1970. They could not have made a bad album, and so that's just that's kind of the direction they were going. And I mean, I have, as far as I think Mike is being, I think what he said is there's truth there, but it was also I didn't like sit there and consciously do pep talks. It was just like, I mean, I would encourage them, and they trusted me. So, yes.
Yeah, I just think the scene has kind of definitely changed on the note of like college radio. When I was managing my station, my co-manager, his show was called Left to the Dial.
Yeah.
My friend would sell like painted I Hate Music shirts to our buddies, and I was wondering if you think there's something kind of like in this kind of college age, early 20s scene that is it more of a moment in kind of music that is drawing people my age like kind of back to their sound, and or is it more of like a moment in kind of like culture that something that their music is speaking to?
I'm not sure I can answer that. I mean, I just think that there's a purity to what they did in a way that was, they didn't play the game. They didn't, kiss people's ass and the record labels. In fact, they did quite the opposite. And I think that's part of what gives them, makes people interested in them still. I don't know. Who knows how that happens? It's like that question, they asked John Lennon many years ago about to what do you attribute your success? And he said, well, if we knew, we'd form another group and be managers. I mean, I think it's that X factor thing. Who knows? Yeah.
On those long van drives that you did, who would you say would be some of the more surprising artists that you all listened to?
What's the what?
Who would you say were some of the more surprising artists you listened to on those roads?
In the band.
I mean, well, for one thing, I did a lot of the late night driving, and Westerberg would always ride shotgun, and he was a button pusher on the radio. He loved just, as you're driving and one station fades and another one comes in, he was looking for that, the song that he knew that he wanted to hear, or the song he didn't know that he loved. So that was always really fun.
What kind of stations would he gravitate?
Yeah, he loved top 40 radio back. There was still a top 40 back then. He liked commercial music in a lot of ways, and he's a huge Bad Company fan or whatever. That was our argument. I used to say Paul McCartney was the greatest singer of all time. He'd say no, it's Paul Rogers. But one particular memory I have that I really treasure was we'd been in D.C., and a friend of mine in D.C. had taped the new Robin Hitchcock album for us on cassette. Said, this came out while you've been traveling. I put it on cassette for you. Thought you might want to listen to it. And it was I Often Dream of Trains. I don't know if you know that one, but great fucking record, and acoustic record. And so we played that. Everybody else was asleep, and I think we put it on, and we listened to the whole thing with barely talking, just the two of us. And when it was over, I remember Paul going, well, Robin's got another pop monster on his hands, because it was not a commercial record at all. So that was a favorite, but that was a one that a great one that I remember listening to in the van. But the other thing, the sort of the normal answer to that is the two bands that we could play at any time in the van that no one would complain about were NRBQ and Big Star.
Yeah.
So They were unanimous. Everybody loved those. And then, Bob would want to play, Bob actually never really wanted to play anything. He just sat in the back and, drank beer. But Tommy would have Squeeze, tapes or whatever. He loved Squeeze. And, Paul had a live Jerry Lee Lewis from Germany, that he loved, and he played that all the time. And I actually, one great band experience I remember was as we were in between Let It Be and Tim, we were driving along, and I had gotten a tape from somebody again on the road of Neil Young bootleg live in Germany, and he does a version of the song Flying on the Ground is Wrong from the first Buffalo Springfield record. And he introduced it in a kind of a funny way. He said, there's a song I wrote for the Buffalo Springfield, but they wouldn't let me sing it. I don't know why they wouldn't let me sing it. He said, here's my version, and he did it. And it's beautiful. One of my favorite songs when Richie Furay sang it on the Buffalo Springfield record, but Neil singing it was like, wow, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm listening to it on the Walkman, and when it was over, I just stopped it. I rewound it to the beginning, and I put the headphones on Paul, and I said, you got to listen to this. And he listened to it, and a lot of times I'd play him stuff, and he didn't like it. That shit or whatever. This one, I could sort of see his body language, that he was really connecting. A couple of weeks later, we're back in Minneapolis. I went over to his place one afternoon and said, what have you been doing? He said, well, I just wrote what's going to be your favorite song on the new album. And I was like, oh, well, I'll be the judge of that. And he sat there on his couch and played me Swingin' Party for the first time. And that was, it's basically the melody of Flying on the Ground is Wrong, turned inside out, and he, stole it in a sneaky way for copyright purposes.
Any other questions? All right. I do believe we have some giveaways. Frank, I'm going to ask for your help. The lovely Frank behind the counter. So we're giving away, what are we giving away?
Posters right there.
Posters here for just anyone to grab. But we have like some limited things.